My name is Amelia Harrison. I am 28 years old. The day we buried my grandfather, the sky felt like it had taken the weight of my chest and stretched it across the clouds. Tight, gray, and ready to split open at any moment. I stood beside his casket without moving. My fingers laced together so tightly they ached. People I barely recognized approached in quiet lines, offering condolences that sounded rehearsed, their hands brushing my shoulder, as if grief were something contagious, something fragile. They didn't know what he was to me. Grandpa William wasn't just my grandfather. He was my anchor, my constant. The only adult in my life who had ever listened when I spoke, really listened, without checking his phone or dismissing my words as dramatic or inconvenient. When I struggled in school, he showed up. When my parents fought, he took me fishing. When my father left when I was 12, walking out with a duffel bag and a slurred apology, Grandpa William stayed. My mother, Susan, had always been busy. Real estate appointments, networking lunches, a phone that never stopped buzzing. She loved efficiency, results, appearances. Love was something she rationed carefully. My sister Mila grew up knowing exactly where she stood. With her. The favorite. The golden child. Married to Brad, living in a polished suburban house in Westfield, raising twin boys and collecting praise like it was currency. And me? I was the quiet one. The extra. The daughter who learned early not to ask for much. At Riverside Cemetery, as the priest finished his final words, I placed my hand against the smooth wood of the casket. Cold. Final. Goodbye felt like something I couldn't afford to say out loud. After the service, the crowd drifted toward St. Mary's Fellowship Hall. Styrofoam cups of burnt coffee, murmured sympathy, hymns echoing faintly from somewhere I didn't belong to anymore. I stayed near the back, still trapped in the moment where his voice was the last thing I remembered clearly. That's when I felt her behind me. Amelia. My mother's voice was tight, controlled, not broken. She didn't wait for a response. Her manicured hand closed around my elbow, steering me away from the room like I was a loose thread she needed to tuck away. We stopped near the church kitchen under a faded portrait of Jesus whose tired eyes somehow matched how I felt. Her perfume hit me first. Expensive, floral, suffocating. "You did such a good job taking care of your grandfather," she said, smoothing her silk blouse. Everyone noticed. I nodded, my throat too dry to answer. "I heard he left you the house on Maple Street." A pause, calculated. "That was generous." "He wanted me to have it," I said quietly. "Well," she replied, lips curling into a familiar smile that never reached her eyes. "You'll need to sign it over to your sister as soon as possible." The words didn't register at first. "I'm sorry, what?" "Mila has children, Amelia. Beautiful twin boys. You're single. No responsibilities tying you down." Her tone was soothing, like she was explaining a math problem. "She needs that house. Stability matters." I felt something shift in my chest, tighten. Why would I go against Grandpa's final wish? Her smile vanished. The warmth drained from her eyes, replaced by something sharp and cold, like a realtor evaluating a desperate seller. "Because," she said slowly, her voice dipped in sugar and venom, "you don't really have a choice." I held her gaze. "Not unless you want the truth about our family to come out." That should have scared me. Maybe it would have, years ago. Instead, something inside me went very still. I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. I had known for a long time, even if no one had ever said it out loud. For the first time, I didn't see my mother. I saw a stranger, one with carefully filed teeth. "You'd better listen to me," she continued. "Mila has a real family, real responsibilities." I nodded once. Not agreement, just control. "I'll think about it." She turned and walked away, leaving behind the scent of perfume and betrayal. The calls started the next day. At first, they were sweet, concerned. "How are you holding up, sweetheart? Your grandfather would be proud if you did the right thing." By the second call, the mask slipped. "You're being selfish. You owe your sister. You owe me." Mila texted photos of her boys playing in their small backyard. "They'd love a real garden," she wrote. When can we see Grandpa's house? I didn't reply. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived. Cream paper, gold lettering, a lawsuit. My own mother was suing me, and as I stared at the legal papers trembling in my hands, I didn't feel fear. I felt something else entirely. They thought I was alone. They were wrong. And Grandpa William had made sure of that. The first thing I did after reading the lawsuit wasn't cry. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so deeply, profoundly insulting that my body didn't know how else to respond. My mother wasn't just asking for the house anymore. She was trying to erase me. I sat at my kitchen table long after the coffee went cold, the legal papers spread out like a crime scene. Words like misrepresentation, biological legitimacy, rightful heir, blurred together until they stopped sounding like English and started sounding like an attack. Susan Reynolds alleged that I had inherited the house through deception, that I was not biologically William Harrison's granddaughter, that during her marriage she had an affair and I was the result. Therefore, she claimed, the house rightfully belonged to Mila, the true blood descendant. It was surreal reading my own existence reduced to a legal strategy. I didn't feel shock, not really. I'd lived my whole life in the shadow of something unspoken, the distance, the coldness, the way my mother always corrected people when they said I looked like Grandpa. I just never expected her to weaponize it. The phone rang while I was still staring at the papers. Mila. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call, then a text. Please call me. This has gone too far. Too far. That was rich. By the third day, the messages changed tone. You're tearing this family apart. Mom is devastated. You're being cruel. Cruel. I deleted every message without responding. What they didn't understand, what they'd never bothered to learn, was that silence didn't mean weakness. It meant restraint. But restraint has limits. A week later, Mila showed up at my apartment. I saw her car through the window before she knocked. Same beige SUV, same suburban armor. She'd brought the boys. Of course she had. When I opened the door, Mason and Carter rushed in first, barreling past me like puppies, shouting my name. Their laughter echoed through the apartment, bright and unguarded. Mila followed, eyes already glossy. See? She said softly, gesturing at them. They love you. I closed the door behind her. What do you want, Mila? She sighed, like I was exhausting her, like this was all such an inconvenience. Can we not do this right now, in front of them? You brought them, I replied evenly. She glanced at the boys, now sprawled on the rug. They need space, a yard, stability. There it is, I said, the pitch. Her mouth tightened. You don't need that house, Amelia. You're young. You'll meet a man. You'll start over somewhere else. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, cleanly. And what, I asked, do I get? She blinked. What do you mean? For giving up the only thing Grandpa ever left me. Her eyes flickered away. Mila, I continued, my voice steady. You already have everything. A husband, kids, a house, Mom's approval. She crossed her arms. That house belongs in our family. It is in your family, I said. He chose me. Her face hardened. You think love makes you entitled. No, I replied. I think effort does. She stood abruptly. You're being selfish. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I learned from the best. She left with the boys an hour later, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid of losing, but because I finally understood how far they were willing to go. 2 days later, my mother called again. I answered this time. Her voice was brittle, controlled. You've embarrassed us, she said. You sued me, I replied. You forced my hand. I laughed softly. You didn't have to say anything about the affair. Silence. Then coldly, truth matters in court. So does motive. She exhaled sharply. You've always been dramatic. There it was. The old script. I gave birth to you, she continued. I raised you. And this is how you repay me? I pictured her saying those words. Perfect posture, immaculate hair, rehearsed pain. You didn't raise me, I said quietly. You managed me. Her voice dropped. You think you're special because he favored you. He loved me, I corrected. That house should be Mila's. No, I said. It shouldn't. Her tone sharpened. If you fight this, you will lose more than a house. I already lost a mother, I replied, years ago. She hung up. The weeks leading up to the court date were relentless. Emails from lawyers, subpoenas, affidavits, and then something that chilled me. A message from a private investigator hired by my mother's legal team. A request for information. Photos, interviews. They were building a narrative, painting me as an outsider, an opportunist. They thought blood would outweigh devotion. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Grandpa William had already seen this coming. I drove to the house on Maple Street one afternoon, standing on the porch I hadn't yet allowed myself to claim. The door creaked open the same way it always had. Inside, everything smelled like him. Coffee, wood polish, old books. I walked to his recliner by the bay window, and that's when I remembered the envelope. The one he'd pressed into my hand 3 months before he died. His fingers trembling, eyes steady. For when they try, he'd said. I hadn't opened it then. I did now. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. Let them talk. I already told the truth. My hands shook. Not with fear, with certainty. They thought the lawsuit was their weapon. They were wrong. It was their confession. And soon, everyone would hear it. The Essex County Superior Court smelled like old carpet, stale coffee, and resentment that had been recycled too many times to remember where it started. I arrived early, not because I was eager, but because I needed the quiet. The moment before everything cracked open. I wore a simple navy dress, nothing dramatic, hair pulled back, no jewelry except the thin silver chain Grandpa William had given me years ago, the one he said looked steady. That word echoed in my head as I took a seat near the front, my purse resting on my lap. Inside it, the USB drive felt heavier than it should have. Grounding. 2 rows ahead of me sat my mother. Susan Reynolds looked immaculate. Perfect posture, salon-fresh bob, cream blazer tailored to suggest dignity rather than aggression. She didn't turn around when I entered. Beside her sat Mila. She clutched a tissue like a prop, eyes rimmed with just enough redness to sell devastation. Brad wasn't with her. That absence spoke louder than any expression. When the bailiff called the room to order, the murmur died instantly. My name echoed across the courtroom. Amelia Harrison. I stood, didn't hesitate, didn't smooth my dress. I walked forward like I'd been preparing for this moment longer than I realized. Judge Harrison, no relation, adjusted his glasses and scanned the documents before him. Miss Harrison, he said, you are contesting the plaintiff's claim regarding the inheritance of the Maple Street property. Yes, Your Honor. Do you have evidence to present? I nodded. Yes. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. I reached into my purse and removed the USB drive, holding it between my fingers. This contains a recorded statement from William Harrison, I said clearly. Recorded voluntarily, while he was of sound mind. My mother's head snapped toward me. For the first time that morning, her composure cracked. The court clerk took the drive, plugged it into the system. The screen behind the judge flickered. Static. Then, light. The image stabilized, and suddenly the room wasn't a courtroom anymore. It was Grandpa's living room. The brown leather recliner by the bay window. Lace curtains glowing with afternoon sunlight. The oxygen tank beside him humming softly. There he was, older, thinner, but unmistakably himself. Hi, kiddo, he said, smiling. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Susan stiffened. Mila's tissue froze mid-wipe. If you're seeing this, Grandpa continued, it means your mother is trying to steal my house from you. Gasps, whispers. Susan's face drained of color. I can't say I'm surprised, he went on calmly. Susan has always believed love is something you earn through appearances, but that's never been how I saw it. He leaned forward slightly, breath steady despite the tube beneath his nose. I want to make one thing very clear, he said. I knew long before this video that Amelia is not my biological granddaughter. Susan's mouth opened. No sound came out. I also knew that biology doesn't mean a damn thing if there's no love behind it. The judge leaned back, eyes fixed on the screen. "You hinted once, Susan," Grandpa said, his voice tightening just slightly, "that Mila was your only child who could give me real grandchildren. That blood mattered more than effort." He shook his head slowly. "I did a DNA test, not because I needed proof, but because I wanted there to be no room for lies." He smiled then, soft, proud. "Amelia visited every Sunday. She helped me bathe when I was too proud to ask. She cooked my meals, sat with me when I couldn't sleep, listened to my stories like they were new every time." I felt my throat close. "She didn't treat me like a wallet or a future inheritance. She treated me like a person." He paused. "That house on Maple Street is hers, because I chose her, just like she chose me." His eyes hardened then. "And I do not want Susan Reynolds or her entitled daughter receiving so much as a single brick of it." The video ended. Silence fell like snow, thick, heavy, suffocating. No one moved. Judge Harrison cleared his throat slowly. "I see no basis for contesting the will," he said. "This case is dismissed." The gavel came down. Final. Susan sat frozen. Mila began to cry, not quietly. I didn't look at either of them, because the truth was already doing its work. What my mother hadn't considered, what her lawyer likely warned her about and she ignored, was that in order to make her case, she had submitted sworn statements. Statements that included her affair, her confession. It was now public record. By the end of the week, Springfield was buzzing. Whispers at Whole Foods. Raised eyebrows at the country club. Conversations that stopped when Susan entered a room. The perfect image cracked. Clients stopped calling. Invitations dried up. The woman who built her career on trust suddenly had none. And Mila? Brad filed for divorce. He cited emotional instability, entitlement, the lawsuit. He asked for primary custody. "I don't want my boys growing up thinking it's okay to take what doesn't belong to them," he told me weeks later when we ran into each other at Target. "You're always welcome at the house," I said quietly. Grandpa would have liked that. He nodded. "Thank you." Mila moved back in with our mother. 2 women suffocating inside a condo full of mirrors. I moved into the house on Maple Street. Painted the porch the sage green Grandpa always talked about. Planted the garden he never got around to finishing. I hung his medals in the hallway. The house didn't feel haunted. It felt held. And for the first time in my life, so did I. Moving into Grandpa Williams' house didn't feel like claiming a victory. It felt like stepping into a promise. The first night I slept there, the house creaked softly around me, settling into itself the way an old man might sigh into his favorite chair. I lay awake listening, not afraid, not lonely, just aware. Every sound carried memory. Every shadow felt familiar. I unpacked slowly, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I wanted to do it right. I painted the wraparound porch the soft sage green Grandpa had always talked about, but never quite committed to. "Too bold," he'd said once, smiling. "Maybe next year." Next year had finally arrived. I dug up the backyard weeds with blistered hands and planted the garden he'd dreamed of. Tomatoes, peppers, basil. The smell of earth clung to me in the best way. Honest. Earned. Inside, I hung his purple heart and bronze star in the front hallway, where guests would see them immediately. Not as decoration, but as context. This house had been built by a man who showed up, even when it cost him something. The kitchen still smelled like bacon and strong coffee. The same cast iron pan sat on the stove, worn smooth by decades of use. The house didn't feel empty. It felt full. The fallout continued quietly, exactly the way real consequences do. My mother stopped calling. I heard through mutual acquaintances, people who suddenly remembered I existed, that her real estate listings had dried up. Turns out, trust isn't something you can rebrand once it's gone. Mila texted me once. "I made a mistake. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time before setting the phone down. Some mistakes don't get do-overs. Not when they involve trying to erase someone's life to claim their inheritance. I didn't wish her harm. I just didn't make space for her anymore. Brad kept his word. Every other Saturday, Mason and Carter came over. They raced through the yard like it was a kingdom, climbing the old oak tree Grandpa used to say was older than Massachusetts itself. "Can we plant pumpkins next year?" Carter asked one afternoon, hands muddy and face flushed. "We absolutely can," I said, ruffling his hair. Children adjust faster than adults. They don't cling to resentment. They accept love where they find it. Watching them play in that yard felt like something closing a circle. One Sunday morning, I drove to Riverside Cemetery with a thermos of Dunkin' coffee, cream, no sugar, and a Boston cream donut, Grandpa's favorite. I sat beside his headstone as the early sun brushed the granite. "I'm proud to be your granddaughter," I said softly. "Biology be damned." I told him about the garden, about the porch, about how the house finally felt alive again. That evening, I made spaghetti in his old pot, stirring the sauce slowly, letting my thoughts wander. I wondered, briefly, if my mother saw her mistake every time she looked at me, if my face reminded her of guilt, of a truth she never wanted to confront. But I didn't need answers anymore. I already had the only father figure I'd ever needed. 6 months later, I sat on the porch with my morning coffee, watching sunlight turn the maple trees gold and crimson. The garden had exceeded every expectation. Neighbors stopped by, stories were shared, life unfolded. My freelance graphic design business thrived from the home office Grandpa had set up years ago. Clients loved the story, not the drama, but the meaning. People are hungry for proof that love is stronger than blood. Some think family means endurance at any cost, accepting harm, staying quiet. They're wrong. Real family protects your dreams. It doesn't demand their sacrifice. Grandpa William taught me that love is showing up, again and again, through pancakes and stories and quiet mornings. The garden will bloom again next spring, and every room echoes with the love of a man who chose me just as fiercely as I chose him. That's legacy enough for any lifetime.